Welcome to the Heal Your Heartbreak podcast with your host, Breakup Bestie, aka me, Kendra. Breakups are hard, but you don't have to do it alone. Each week, I will be taking you through a different topic as it relates to breaking up, healing from heartbreak, growing in your single life, dating, and getting back into happier and healthier relationships. The goal of this show is to provide support, hope, tips, and to remind you that above all, this too shall pass. Welcome to episode 35 of the Heal Your Heartbreak podcast, and I am so excited to introduce another amazing guest on the show today. And today I have Amrit, and she is going to be talking not only about anxiety, which I know a lot of you guys struggle with, but I am extra excited for her to be on the show today because she is also going to be sharing her personal breakup story. And I think, you guys hear a lot about my personal breakup story, but I am excited to be able to share someone else's story and how she was able to work through it, not only using her own advice that she helps clients with, but also her own journey into learning new tools and learning how to incorporate them into her life during a really, really tough time. So, Amrit, thank you so much for coming on. And I'd love if you can, introduce yourself and tell everyone what you do.
Yes, thank you for having me. I am a holistic health and anxiety coach. I help women to change their relationship with their bodies, minds, and spirits, their triggers, so that they can find their own intuitive voice and live from that place. So I love what I do. It's amazing to watch these women really commit to aligning themselves with their higher selves and then going forth from that, like magic just kind of unfolds in their lives. And I think that that's really beautiful. And I feel honored to be able to be a channel or a vessel or whatever for that while I'm on this earth.
Well, I've been, kind of following you from afar, loved your content. And then I noticed, this shift in your content when you opened up about your breakup. And I just always admired not only your openness and your vulnerability, but just being able to share exactly where you're at and where you had been struggling with. So was very excited to have you on the show. So I'd love for you to first, talk about, I think when we land in roles like this, like what you do, what I do, it always stems from, I believe, a personal experience of something that you were able to overcome. So I'd love to hear what led you into becoming what you are and what you do.
Yeah, it's kind of a long journey, and it's got so many layers. I grew up in a home in which like a holistic lifestyle was very much part of how we lived. I've been doing like yoga and meditation since I was 8 or 9 years old, a healthy diet, like movement, all of those things. However, I also had a significant amount of trauma in my life. I would say I was the person, even in high school, that people would come to and be like, what should I eat if I want to like do this? Or like, like what herb should I take if I want like to focus when I study? And so about 4 years ago, I want to say, it just started to be a pattern. Like people were coming to me and they were like, you've been through a lot, but like you seem so calm and like so not anxious, but you say you struggle with anxiety. Like what do you do? Like, how do you do that? And so I was like, okay, this is a pattern. Maybe I should look into something. And so I started looking at programs, and I was like, I had massive imposter syndrome because I was like, I need a license so people think that I'm legitimate. And so I went to IIN, which was a great program. Of course, teaches you like nothing about anxiety, but like helped me to build a business and helped me to just learn more. And I've also gone to herbalism school since then. And I would say when my life really started to fall apart in my marriage, I would say that was like 2015, 2016. That's kind of when the bulletproof coffee trend started in the United States. And I was like, I'm gonna try this out. And I started researching herbs. I'd been taking ashwagandha since I was a teen. So I was like very familiar with some of the Ayurvedic herbs. And I started like making this morning beverage be part of my morning ritual. And there was something very healing about it. Like every single morning, I'd be like, what do I need today? And I'd go in and I'd make this latte and I'd put it in a beautiful mug and I would sip it while I would journal or I would meditate. And that experience, it sounds so simple and so small, it was that grounding force that helped me to stay grounded through some of like the hardest years that were to come. And so then people started asking me about that and what I was doing there. And somebody came to me one day and she's like, I can't function. I'm constantly anxious. I have like, it's all I think about and it just spirals. And I was like, I totally understand. I think I have some ways that I can help you. And we started working together. And within like a couple months, she's like, I woke up this morning and I had no anxiety and I've had anxiety for my entire life. And like, what you're doing is magic. And I was like, well, the reality is I'm giving you these tools, but you're doing the work. Like it's not me. Like I'm giving you these things you may not have been aware of, but you are the one that's doing the work. And so that's when I started really just being like, okay, I'm here to help people. I'm here to show people that you can quite literally go through hell and back and come out on the other side and not only just survive, but like thrive and love your life and live from a grounded, connected place. Because the reality of anxiety is it happens when we're not in the current moment and we're not in our bodies. We're future tripping, we're past tripping that's leading to the future tripping. And like it becomes this like, for lack of a better word, like mental masturbation that leads nowhere. And so that's kind of like how that journey of starting to work with women started. And it's unfolded, it's evolved. I collect new tools, trying new things with clients all the time. Sometimes you try things and it doesn't work for that person, so you have to go back to the drawing board. And it's just really work that like I feel like that just needs to be done. I think so many people today struggle with daily anxiety. And then like for somebody like me, I also have PTSD. So I don't just have anxiety, I have anxiety induced PTSD and PTSD induced anxiety. And so there's like so many layers and people don't understand. You can be anxious because you're dehydrated. You can be anxious because you're tired. You can be anxious because you're in an environment that's not supporting you and you might not be aware of that, but your body is lit up and is like, this isn't working for me. And so it's not just you're anxious because you're in your mind. There's so many elements to it. And that's why the work is so intricate.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. That was amazing. I feel like I have so many things I wanted to touch on with that. As someone who struggled with anxiety most of my life, and I think when I was a kid, I was like a ball of anxiety, like couldn't fall asleep at night when I was a kid. And I would always utilize like extracurricular activities. Like I was in like every club at school and I didn't realize that I was trying to solve my anxiety
Yeah.
through just overdoing. And that's always been my style of dealing with my anxiety is like overdoing things because I don't want to feel how I'm feeling. I don't want to be in my body.
Mm-hmm.
And then I think once I got sober, everything just came like it was like I was driving in a car really fast for a really long time and then I had to slam on the brakes and like everything in the trunk flew to the front and it was like okay, I have to learn how to deal with this anxiety because I can't drink it away anymore. I
Mm-hmm.
can't smoke it away anymore. It's like I have to learn how to live with this in my body. And I love that you touched on that like morning grounding routine because I always thought I was like, I'm spontaneous. I like traveling. I don't like routine. I don't like schedules. And then, a few years into my sobriety, I remember I like every time I got home from a vacation, I would be a disaster. And finally, someone pointed out, like, I think you're just someone that like has to live in routine. And it's like, I
Mhm.
finally had to realize that morning routine, whether it be 10 minutes, 30
Yeah.
minutes, if I don't start my day like that, it typically like does not go very well. So that's
Yeah.
something that I always encourage. Always on my first calls with my coaching clients, I ask, like, what does your morning routine look like? Like, how do you start your day? Because it's so, I don't know. I think I used to think that your morning routine had to be like an hour or so. And
Yeah.
just learning, like, you can just start so small and it can make such a big difference.
I we are creatures of habit, and I think we allow the mind is the most beautiful thing. It's also the darkest, most hideous thing. Like, it can take you from one side to the other, and, like, that's something I focus on a lot with my clients. I'm like, your mind will make you believe anything, and it's also beautiful because it's like it also protects you. So your body stores everything and it's always there, but your mind is like, "Oh, I don't remember what that happened," because it knows like that's something maybe you can't handle right now, or maybe not, now's not the time in this place. And the thing with the daily routine is that it's not about it. This is the biggest thing that I talk about with clients is you don't want it to be habitual. You want it to be a ritual.
Mm.
You want to It's with intention. You're waking up each morning, maybe it's 10 minutes earlier, and if all I get in, like some mornings all I get in is making my latte and like writing down three things I'm grateful for, and maybe like 3 minutes of breath work or something. But it's always something because it is my touchstone each day. And if no other part of the day is for me, that part of the day is for me. And I grew up in the culture that I grew up in. Morning practice, it's called sadhana, it's actually a part of my name. Like it's like I'm it's my destiny here on this earth, this lifetime, to have a morning practice, spiritual practice. But it was something that I've done since I was really little, and it's evolved so much because even though I grew up in this beautiful like yogic home, it was also, which we can talk about this later, a cult. So that caused its own that its own problems. But there's been times in my life where I've just stepped away and like not done any morning practice, and things just have not gone well for me in those periods of time because I don't, honestly, when I've stepped away from it and not doing it, it's because I'm trying to run away from something that's happening inside me that I don't want to deal with. So that moment of just being brutally honest with yourself and being like, how am I this morning? This morning sucks. I'm down. I don't feel good. I don't like myself. I don't like my life, like whatever. And it's like, at least you had that one honest moment with yourself, and tomorrow you can have a different one. And so it's really about you and honoring yourself so you can carry yourself into your day from an honest place.
I love that, and I find myself doing that too. The times I have stepped away from, like, my thing is journaling every
Hmm.
morning, and the times that I step away from that, it's always because there's something that I need to journal about that I'm not doing.
Yep.
And I was even talking to a client this week. She was saying how all she's been doing is listening to audiobooks. And I was like, I do, like, when I'm in a place where I don't want to address something, I will just listen to podcasts like all day because I can't stand any blank space in my
Mhm.
head because I know something's going to come up. So it's like having these touch points where if I don't want to journal, if all I'm doing is listening to podcasts, I'm not listening to music because music's so moving for me and it brings stuff up.
Yeah,
And if I can't stand silence, it's because there's something there that I'm choosing not to look at.
100%.
So I think with anxiety, I think it's like twofold where we want to have practices that are more like, I would probably call them like more like investment practices where
Mhm.
they're setting us up for a good day. They're
Yeah.
kind of these things that we're like putting in our spiritual tank to help us deal with whatever comes our way. And then I also think there are also practices that when anxiety hits, like in the
Mhm.
moment, what do I do
Yeah.
to help kind of control that? So can you, kind of speak to that and then talk about, what are some examples of those practices that you help your clients with?
Absolutely. I That's so very much true. It's a long game and a short game. It's the long game is like just committing yourself to doing the deeper work, which is what we were talking about before we started recording of like I have clients who are like, I don't understand. I feel like I was doing better before we started doing this work, and I feel like I'm in a worse place now than we started. And I have to explain. My favorite analogy is, when you go outside and it's cold and you don't have gloves on and your hands freeze, and you come back inside and there's that really uncomfortable moment like where you like stretch your hand and they're tingling and they're burning and they feel like they're on fire but they feel like they're on ice at the same time until they finally like thaw out and warm up. It's kind of what starting a healing path is like. There's going to be uncomfortable moments, and that's why people avoid it, because they don't want to get into those uncomfortable moments. But what they don't realize is they're already uncomfortable all the time. It's just a different type of discomfort. And it's like, do you want to live your life in that uncomfortable all the time, or moments of discomfort where you get honest and you dig deeper and you heal so that you can overall live a happier, more door-filled life?
You guys can't see me, but I'm nodding that whole way because that happens to me all the time with people going through breakups. It's like you have to kind of dive into the wound
You
before
do.
you can
You
start.
got to pick the scab off and dig
Yeah.
around and swim around in it. And that sounds disgusting, but it's the reality.
You have to. And I
Yeah.
think especially for people with anxiety like
Mhm.
me, I have stayed in very uncomfortable situations for very long
Yeah.
periods of time because I'm anxious about change.
Yeah.
And there have been times where I'd rather stay in a really bad situation because I don't want to explore what it looks like outside of it.
And we'll get to that because that was my exact scenario. But so for, like you said, long term, like journaling, meditating, moving your body, eating a healthy diet. Like I said, there's so many things that go in. Like, so what I normally do with clients is I'm like, let's make a list of things when your anxiety pops up. The moment you feel it, if you can catch it, is the best. But I know what happens sometimes. You're like, it's kind of there. And then you're like in the middle of a panic attack all of a sudden. You're like, how the fuck did I get here? So the first thing is like if you can, like taking yourself to a bathroom, getting outside, something. If you can get outside and you can put your bare feet in dirt or on the grass or even on pavement, something that, again, you're either completely out of your body or you're starting to leave your body, something that's going to anchor you in, and that cool or warm earth underneath you is going to do that. If you can't do that, just taking a deep breath and like really feeling your feet underneath you, checking in with kind of like taking a scan and being like, okay, feet, ankles, calves, like a body scan is really great. And then left nostril breathing is my 1,000% anxiety 101 911 breath. I'll do it with clients even just for like 3 breath cycles on the phone, and they'll be like, holy crap. And I'm like, yeah. And there's a whole science behind it. It's right nostril helps to balance. If I remember correctly, it's the right side of your brain. It activates your parasympathetic nervous system, which is your rest and digest. It pulls you, again, when it comes to anxiety, I can't stress enough that your breath is everything. Because if you notice when you get anxiety, your breath is the first thing you lose. And so left nostril breathing is literally just like pressing onto your right nostril to plug it. And then you inhale deeply through your left, exhale deeply through your left. Your mouth is closed the whole time. I love to do it to 8. I also have pretty expansive lung capacity. I just tell people do it to as much as you can. If you can only get to 1, start with 1. Inhale to 1, exhale to 1. And then when that feels okay, go up to 2. And then when that feels okay, go up to 3 and kind of like work up. But what's happening with the reason breath is also so important is because your mind can't focus on two things at once. And so if you're literally counting and focusing on your breath, noticing how your lungs are expanding in your chest, how your belly's moving out, how your ribs are expanding out and then falling back in, you're forced again to come back into your body and back into the present moment and being able to be like, okay, there's no lion in the room right now. So I'm going to be in this moment right now and I will focus on something later. So left nostril breathing, also just deep breathing. Like if you're like out in public and you are like, this is going to look weird and you can't escape to a bathroom or a car, really just inhale to 4, hold for 4, exhale to 4. You can also hold to 4 if you want and do the whole box breathing. I just like the triangle. And it's really honestly kind of playing a game with your mind. I had a client the other day with a huge win. This is a client who couldn't function really, like anxiety ruled her every day. And she was like, yeah, I was working on the other day and I could feel this anxiety starting to come up. And I was like, all right, I'm going to finish this 2 hours of work that I have. And then I'll give myself 20 minutes to freak out after. And she got to the end of the 2 hours and she was like, and I didn't have any anxiety and I didn't need to freak out. And I was just like, yes, this is exactly what we're working towards. And so also just really shutting your mind down in the sense that, and this is like the third tool, once you've done the left nostril breathing, every time a thought of negativity or anxiety leading or self-loathing, self-hatred, anything like that comes in, you don't engage with it. And this is the biggest trick with meditation. People are like, I can't just get my mind to stop, and you can't. That's physically impossible. Even when you're sleeping, your mind is going because you're dreaming. Like your subconscious is always moving, right? And so it's about not engaging. So it's like when a thought comes in, it's like, okay, I'm not going to engage with that right now. And it's hard at first. And sometimes you feel insane because you're doing it like 10,000 times a day. But you start to notice like those thoughts come in less frequently. And when they do, the letting go of them is just way easier. And so those are kind of like my 3 like main tools. I have like a whole workbook of tools, but those are like my 3: get outside, take a walk, like get in your body, use your breath, deactivate your engaging mind.
It's so interesting. And I've never tried the left nostril breathing, but definitely something I will be incorporating. And I'm so glad you brought up the, like, when you were talking about how just counting your breath, like how you can't focus on 2 things at once. And I never knew why this worked. But when I would get panic attacks in early sobriety, I had this reading that I did every day and I read it so much that I had it memorized. So I would just recite it in
Yeah.
my head.
Yeah.
And I was like, okay, I'm just going to recite this.
Yep.
I call myself I lay on the carpet when I'm anxious. It's like my like thing that I love to do.
Yeah, laying on the ground because it's grounding.
Yeah.
There's a reason that works because it is quite literally you're grounding yourself.
Yeah. Yeah, but getting outside, laying down, like reciting something in my
Mhm.
head always worked really well. And I'm also so glad you brought up that point about meditation because I I didn't grow up in quite like as like progressive spiritual family as you did, but I will say my dad's meditated since I was born and
Mhm.
he's, very much into that. And when I was struggling with anxiety, he would always, kind of push me to try it. And I had that same thought of like, I'm just not good at it. I just can't do it because
Yeah.
I can't shut my head up. And then finally, someone's like, it's a practice. Like,
Mhm.
you might, in a 10-minute meditation, you might get 15 seconds of like
Quiet.
calm, of
Yeah.
quiet. And
Yeah.
then as you keep doing it, it might go to 30 seconds or a
Mhm.
minute, and just being able to learn how to let those thoughts just pass by. And I've tried different like visualizations things
Mhm.
where I see like a thought as like a boat on a river going by or
Yeah.
a car going by. Or my mom would always teach me the trick when I was little because I just had such a hard time sleeping because I was anxious. And she would say, okay, when a thought comes in, like think about it like a balloon and then just visualize yourself like letting it
Mhm.
go. And so meditation, I'd say probably in the last year, I've finally like have committed to doing it regularly. And that's another thing too that I tend to avoid when
Yeah.
I'm
Oh, 100%. And that's the thing about meditation. My relationship with meditation has evolved and changed so much. I used to think unless I got up at 4:30 every morning and did an hour of yoga and an hour of meditation, that's the only way I could be like a spiritual being, which is so wrong. So don't take that and think I'm saying that's
don't
right.
take
It's
that advice.
so wrong. Meditation is 1,000% not about that moment that you're sitting in meditation. It's 1,000% about learning to discipline your mind. And I don't use discipline in like a regimented way. It's more of like you have to learn to be able to look at these shadow thoughts and not let them consume you. And that is so easier said than done. But what happens when you give yourself that 10 minutes every day, or even I tell people start with 3 minutes, like just do 3 minutes of left nostril breathing every morning, and you will notice overall your anxiety will be less because you're priming yourself for that. And your body will also learn, oh, we're relaxing now because you're doing the left nostril breathing, so it'll work more quickly. But it's about when you're not sitting on your meditation pad and something happens, and this is a very like Buddhist philosophy, but of like non-attachment to the scenario that's happening. And all of this stuff I'm saying, this is not easy work. I'm not, it's,
Yeah.
I still, like you said, I still avoid meditation sometimes. I still, like I said, I have PTSD. I have episodes. I will have panic attacks. I just know how. I think the biggest thing that happens is people feel a panic attack coming on or feel anxiety coming on, and they get anxiety about their anxiety.
Yes. That's been a huge lesson for me is not to judge
Yep.
my feelings.
Yep. And so that's another tool. And I tell my clients, like my clients have access, like they can text me anytime. I'm very good about boundaries about like when I respond. But I will literally be like, when you're feeling anxious, text me and be like, I'm anxious today. And having somebody validate that and being like, okay, like, let's talk. Like, are you in your body? Did you go for a walk? Like, did you try these tools? What's going on with you this morning? And giving something a name is the most powerful thing. Think about all of the people in this world who have traumatic things happen to them, and they hold it in themselves and they never tell anybody. And how then you hear of them getting like physical illnesses and all these things because they're holding it in. Giving something a name calls it out, it brings it out of the shadow into the light, and then gives it permission to be able to be seen and heard and felt and healed.
Absolutely. And that was going to be kind of the last thing I asked on this piece is like there are times when I'm like such an action person to get out of feelings. Like, give me a list of 12 things to do and I will do all of them because I don't want to feel this way.
Yeah.
But there are times when I might meditate and journal and exercise and drink water and get a good night's sleep and
Yeah.
eat really well. And I still feel anxious.
Mhm.
And just having to be like, okay, I'm just anxious right now. And it's not that there's something wrong necessarily. Like it's just there. And I kind of just, and then, so like, how do you help people learn to accept that there are days when it's
Yeah.
just like
It's so true. Like there's those days where you go down the list of everything and you're like, this isn't working. It's a couple things. I think it depends on the person exactly what's going on, but part of it might be like, what is it that you're not wanting to look at? Let's like look at that. Like, is there something underneath that that's like, are you not processing some anger? Do you really just need to cry? Like, do you need to go scream into a pillow, put on some Eminem and like rage and thrash your body around? Like, what is it that you're avoiding is one of them. And then the other thing is like some days are just like that. And that's when you pull out like your CBD or like your kava, some reishi, like you pull those things out and you're like, I'll try this. And some days it's just surrendering to, okay, today is going to be an anxious day and it is what it is. I'm going to do my best to continue like to breathe and keep myself in my body, but this is here and it's uncomfortable and I hear it and it's okay. And that's the thing is like we're so afraid of it. And it is a message of some sort. It doesn't mean it's a huge message, but it means there's something going on. And honestly, like, and so many of us are empaths. There's days where you're picking up on something that you have no idea what you're picking up on. And I'm like, okay, today might be one of these days. Like Monday this week, I woke up and I was so down. I started my period. I was just like irritated at the world. And I was like, I'm going to give myself today. I have therapy at 2. I'm going to make my latte. I'm going to journal. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to do all that stuff. And then I'm going to lay on my couch. I don't have clients today. And I'm going to watch Harry Potter. And that's what I did. And I was like, and tomorrow, if I still feel down, I'm going to honor that I'm feeling down, but I'm going to do everything that I need to do and just like push through. Because there's a very fine balance of learning when you need to honor it and when you need to push through it. And I think part of what happens is there's an indulgence in, can be an indulgence in indulging it and not being like, okay, I have shit I have to do today that's for my livelihood. I can't avoid this anymore. I feel down. I'm going to text a friend. I'm going to do all these things, but I'm also going to keep going today. It's finding that balance because I think some people just keep going all the time to numb it. And some people indulge and just like are like, I can't function. And there's no judgment on either side of that, but there's that balance of honoring where you're at, feeling everything you're feeling, and doing what you need to do to take care of yourself. Because that's a deeper level of self-care that most people haven't gotten to yet.
If you like what you hear on this podcast and you want more, you can work with me directly using my courses. No matter where you feel stuck in your breakup recovery, there is going to be a course for you. With the Breakup Emergency First Aid Kit, you can jumpstart your healing process right after a breakup if you feel lost and you feel like the world has just been ripped out from underneath you. With the Detox Your Ex course, we'll go through the no contact rule and how to start detoxing your ex from your life and from your obsessive thoughts. In Breakthrough Your Breakup, we'll dig into the feelings, resentments, anger, and your relationship in general so you can walk away from it with a feeling of peace. Lastly, in Moving On After Heartbreak, we'll get you prepared to go out and meet your dream partner without that fear of getting hurt again. And if you want all of these, or like I call it, the whole shebang, you can still purchase Heal Your Breakup course, which will go through everything I just listed and more. And for my podcast listeners, you can still use the code PODCAST for the full course and get $25 off. Head to the link in my show notes to take the quiz and find out which course is best for you so you can start moving on, healing, and feeling happy again. And for a limited time, you'll also get my 90-day breakup journal for free as a bonus. If you listen to this show, you know how much I love journaling and how important it is. So head to the show notes to start your healing journey with me. Now back to the show. This is like the perfect segue to start talking about the breakup because I literally have a lesson in one of my courses about finding your balance because when you go through something as hard as a breakup, yeah, we do need to feel the feelings in order to heal, but like we can't feel them all the time. I say like we turn into like a puddle. Like we can't do that.
It's like if you acquiesce to being an empath and you just take on everybody's shit all the time, like you won't, there's no functioning in a world like that.
Exactly. And you still have a job and you still have
and it's codependent. There's also that.
Yeah. It's like we can't completely, so we have to find that balance of like, okay, what do I need to do to get through my day to day? Like, what am I going to do to distract myself? And that's okay. And then, like, when I have the capacity and the space, like, how am I going to move into that? Let me feel my feelings. Like, let me pull out my journal. Let me do this stuff. But like, we don't necessarily have to do, it's not like we're going to do we can't distract ourselves for 6 months straight and then like
No.
have everything come up at
And
once.
then have it just be healed.
Yes, which
Yeah.
a lot of
No.
people believe that because
Yeah.
they've distracted themselves into thinking that they have healed. So I would love for you to, give, description of your breakup,
Mhm.
and I'll get into more like, I feel like this is like probably where the rubber met the road in terms
Yeah.
of being able to like help yourself as you've
Yeah.
helped so many other people. And I want to make a note. I will be bringing her back on for a part 2 of this episode, just because her story is so beautiful, and what came out of her breakup, I think, is really beautiful in the terms of codependency. And so I think, so we will definitely be having her on to talk more about codependency. But in terms of, the anxiety and
Mhm.
everything that went into that, I'd love for you to speak on that.
Yeah. So my ex, I was married. We were together for 12 years, married for 8. And to be truthfully honest, it was never a healthy relationship. There were like, of course, there's always like silver lining moments, but when you're in it and you don't want to go through that discomfort of getting out, you cling to those silver lining moments and you're like, yeah, there's all this, but like the love is this, and like there's this and this and this. And I'll say we grew up, we had very similar traumas. We grew up in the same community together, so we understood that from each other, and we very much trauma bonded. Which, if you don't know anything about it, I just recommend you look it up because it's really eye opening. And I think once I learned about that, I was like, well, shit.
Explains it.
Oh, this explains pretty much everything. He struggled with addiction, and it was a emotionally and verbally abusive relationship. Um, but there was like this element of like, but he makes me feel so safe, and like, but he's provided so much protection for me and all of these things. And we did a full formal like connection where we talked about everything that happened in relationship to addiction. And I thought that was like a new starting point. I was like, everything's out on the table. I know everything. I'm willing to forgive and move forward. And that just didn't happen. My mom got sick January of last year and had to go through a 6-month chemo process. And in that time, it the person that I thought was going to be there for me to support me through that was not. And it just got really ugly. And there's kind of 2 turning points of like, he actually was like, I want a divorce. And I was like, let's try a separation. Like, let's just like take some time. I'm a big believer in separations. My parents separated for 4 years after 25 years of marriage and got back together. So I was like, maybe that's something. And I'm going to be very honest in saying like, when we separated, I was very much like, we are getting back together. So I moved out. I got my own place for the first time in my entire life. I was terrified, like, to say the least. I very much came from the mindset that we were soulmates and there was nothing we couldn't work through. And I nobody could love me like him. And I was never going to find a love like that again. And I wasn't going to be able to survive without him. And the 2 turning points was, one, I was talking to Danica one day and she asked me how long I'd been keeping him from his bottom. And I was on a walk and I literally stopped walking and I was like, honestly, probably 12 years. And she said, that's a good answer. As long as you're there, you are the bottom. And there's nothing underneath you. You will be the blame. You will be the reason for everything. And I was like, it's a hard pill to swallow, but you're probably right. And then the other one was my mom and I were talking and she goes, there's no way in hell if you had a client that was in this scenario that you would support them in staying.
When they're coming out of a relationship like that, I go, if your best friend was in that relationship, what would you tell her?
Yeah.
Like, we have different standards
Yeah.
for other people, but not the same for
Mhm.
ourselves.
Yeah. And so we separated. I got my own place, and by October, that was in June. By October, I was like, I can't go back. I can't. Yeah, right now sucks. This is so painful. The divorce diet is really fucking real. There were days where 2 bites of yogurt is all I could get down. And it was like this vicious. I remember sitting in my therapist's office pre-COVID and crying, being like, I'm so hungry, but I'm so nauseous. And I'm hungry because I'm nauseous because I'm hungry, but everything I think about eating makes me nauseous. And it was like somebody who comes from, I never had an eating disorder, but I definitely have body dysmorphia and like some disordered eating. It was just trigger. So it was like adding another trigger on top of that. But I was like, I can't risk another relapse. I can't risk being lied to. I can't risk the gaslighting and feeling insane anymore. Like, I deserve better than that. And I didn't think that I did, but now I know that I do. And I just couldn't. I was like, if I go back, it's going to say far more about me than it does about him.
Mm-hmm.
And that was the thing that kept me going. And so I started being like, okay, every morning I'm going to get up. I'm going to journal about how I'm feeling. I'm going to meditate. I'm going to dance. I'm going to move my body. I'm going to keep myself accountable with food. And like, even if it's like every hour I take a bite of something, at least I would like make my bulletproof coffee in the morning and put like a tablespoon and a half of ghee in it, because I'd be like, well, at least I'll get this fat in this morning. like smoothies were my best friend. Things like that. And I remember sitting, and my PTSD was so flared for several reasons. I'd started dating, which was a whole like triggering thing. And then also like, even though I'm the one that decided to leave, one of my biggest triggers is abandonment. And so I was like, my brain was on fire all the time. And so my therapist was like, you don't want to do prescription medication, which is totally fine. How do you feel about like using cannabis right now? And I was like, I'm open to it.
Mm-hmm.
It changed my life. I'm a huge proponent if that's something that feels good for you. I also know there's other like elements to that. But for me, I came from a very anti-cannabis background. I thought that people were numbing themselves. I thought that people were like lowering their vibration and shrinking their aura and like all this like spiritual bullshit, so to speak. And for me, in the way that I was using it, what it allowed for me to do was feel my emotions actually even deeper, but from a different perspective, and not react to them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
If that makes any sense.
Yeah, no, that definitely makes sense. And I think what I'm hearing too is like you opened yourself up and were willing to see things differently and willing to try things differently. Because I think
Absolutely.
when we step into something like a breakup and we're like, I'm doing this myself, I don't need help, I don't need support, like I know how to do this, I'm a capable person, and we just shut ourselves off to the advice from friends and family, or seeking outside help.
Yeah.
It's so the fact that you were like, I don't know how to handle this, and so I need help.
Yeah. I had no clue. I was like, I know what I can do. I know. And I was also really battling this like idea of like, you're failing, you're giving up, and like maybe this was your karma, and like, are you like trying to escape it? Like there was so many little like pieces of like subconscious things going through my mind. And you hear, I was on Instagram like a month ago, and I was like on the like find reels page or whatever, and there was this woman that was like divorce, or marriage is forever, and I was like, wow, that really comes from somebody who hasn't been in an abusive relationship that needs to get out.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's really, because there still is, it's 2020 and there's still that judgment.
Mhm.
And with addiction too, the partner gets blamed for so much shit. And that's where like I started really, and like this will be a segue for next time, but like really digging into my codependency work. And like I told you before we started recording, 4 years ago, if someone called me codependent, I would like have the most ridiculous reaction to it. I would be so reactionary. I'd be like, you don't know what you're talking about. I'm not codependent, blah, 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 blah. Now I'm like, I'm a recovering codependent. Like, it is, there's no way I'm not, with my story and my life. And this is the thing, I did not become codependent from my relationship with my ex. I think I sought that relationship out because I was codependent, and it allowed me to continue to play out that cycle
Yeah.
until I decided I was done playing that cycle out.
No, absolutely. And I think when we go through a breakup, there are, I've said this on this podcast before, but it's like an onion. It's like we have to
Mhm.
dig through different layers. But I also like, I don't think we have to get into the deep stuff necessarily like right away. Sometimes in the beginning, it's like, how am I just going to like make it through the first month, or how am I going to
Yeah.
make it through today? And then when we're ready, I think more will be revealed as to, what's coming up. Um, and I thought it was really interesting, you speaking about what you did right after the breakup, and like without looking at the extra help that you got, but you basically said like you did the same things you were doing before.
I did, but I got really honest with myself about it. I was, again, like, I wasn't habitually doing it. I was making it my time, and I knew I couldn't do the future journaling. I will say that. Like, that was something I did really, I was like, when things were really falling apart, that was just, I was like desperately like putting that into like that future journal. And I remember moving, like, this place that I'm in now is the hugest sign of our power of manifesting, because the way it happened was, the house we were in, we were going to just sign another lease. I was going to stay in it and get a roommate. And then like the closer it got, I was like, I do not want a roommate right now. Like, that's the last thing I need, is somebody in my space. And so we decided to like give up the house. It was like the day we had to give them our notice of whether we were going to sign a new lease or not. I went to a coffee shop. I'm like, I'm going to go look for apartments. I probably emailed 30 places. Not one did I hear back from. I had that morning sat down and written down everything I wanted in my journal. I was like, this is what I want. Like, and it was physical things, but it was also like a place I can heal, like a place I can find myself again. Cause I didn't realize until I was 2, 3, 4 months out, I had completely lost myself. My light was almost completely gone. And because I poured everything into somebody else
Mhm.
and nothing into me. And I felt like a fraud too, because I'm like, I'm coaching people to live their best lives and I'm not honoring my own life. I'm living for someone. I'm living in hopes that somebody else lives up to this expectation that I want them to be. And they probably can't do that. Like, some people just don't have the capacity to do those things.
And it wasn't
And
anything against you,
had nothing to do.
Yeah.
I said to him once, I was like, why am I not enough for you to do this? Why am I not enough?
Yeah.
And it had nothing to do with me. Like,
Yeah.
zero. But it feels so personal.
Absolutely.
So I wrote all these things down that I wanted, and I'm on the next door app, and it's like 1-bedroom apartment, like nice area in Portland. And I called him, and he's like, don't just come look at it. Like, photos don't really do it justice. And I walked in the front door, and I literally was like, this is my home. Like, no, like, and I was like, can I have 24 hours? Like, this is the only place I've looked at. And the next morning I was like, I'll take it. And I moved in like 2 weeks later. And so I was like, wow, when you make a decision that aligns with your higher self, the universe is like, girl, here's your reward. And
It's
every day I wake up and I'm like, this is my place. And that was the other thing that unfolded after being away from it for months, is like, I realized how much I dressed for somebody else, how I talked for someone else, how I like didn't do all these things. And I was like, interesting, how much of myself have I been holding back for how long? And so I went this process of like, who's Amrit-Sadhana? Like, who is this woman? Like, rediscovering who I am and maybe discovering who I am for the first time, experiencing myself in relationship to other men and how what I'm willing to tolerate and what I'm not willing to tolerate, and in relationship to female friendships, and all of these things kind of unfolded. And I will say, even though the last year and a half has been really hard, it doesn't compare to the 12 years of not feeling safe, really. And even with all the shit I've dealt with dating and a divorce and like all of that, I'm still happier than I've ever been in my entire life. And every morning I wake up and I'm so ridiculously proud of myself that it's worth like all of it.
Yeah. Oh, that's so beautiful. And I really hope those of you that are listening can, hear that hope and, believe it for yourself, because it is there. I truly think breakups, while they are one of the more painful things we'll go through in our lives, they are one of the most beautiful opportunities that we'll get to like really get to know ourselves again. Because I think, as motivated as we can be, we're typically mostly motivated by pain. Like, we'll do the work when we don't want to
Yeah.
feel this way. So breakups provide a large amount of motivation in the form of pain.
Yeah.
And so the fact that, so you typically have two choices. Like, are you gonna, let this keep you stuck, which for long periods of time, or are you gonna harness this and do what you did and like, let me dig into this a little bit deeper. Let me look at some patterns that I've had my whole life. Like,
Yeah.
how can I harness this and use it to my advantage?
Yeah.
And then the last question I have for you in terms of anxiety, and it was something that you had mentioned to me before, is when it came to like you deciding to walk away. You talk about the difference between anxiety and intuition. And I think a lot of people who are either in a relationship that they're not sure about, they'll say, like, they have this voice in their head that's like, this isn't right, this isn't right. And they're like, oh, I'm just overthinking it. Like, I'm being too hard on the person. I'm doing all these things. So they write it off as like
Mhm.
anxiety or anxious thoughts. But then there's these like very deep guttural feelings that we get that I believe to be like our intuition. How were you able to make that differentiation to walk away? And then how do you help people determine what is the difference between anxiety and intuition?
Yeah, absolutely. I think my body had been screaming at me for a really long time. I had like in the last few years of our marriage, I'd put quite a bit of weight on to, it's funny, to make myself bigger, but also make myself smaller, because make myself less, not saying that weight's less attractive, but like to kind of hide myself
Yeah.
more. I'd been getting sick a lot. Like there was just like a lot of things that were lining up, and I wasn't listening. And anxiety is a physical feeling. Yes, it's what's happening in your mind, but it is a physical feeling. And for me, anxiety my anxiety will sit like anywhere from like my chest, my solar plexus to down into my stomach. It depends on like what's going on. But like it kind of like sits and it moves around, and it has like a frantic, like fluttery, ungrounded feeling. Intuition, there's none of that. It is a knowing. And yeah, you can like mind play with it and like turn it into anxiety, but like it's like it's literally like a root is like pulling you down into the earth, and there's nothing that can change what that feeling is.
Also find that even if my intuition is telling me something that I don't like, it's still very calming.
Yeah, 100%. You're like, I
I
do
don't
not
like
like
Yeah.
that. I do not want to feel that, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't like this, but it's like I loved what you said about anxiety being very fluttery because it is. It's like
Yep.
it's very shaky, it's frantic, it's
It's
scattered.
frantic, it's phonetic, it's like um it's very ungrounded. Um and I find that for me, like I said, it was a moment of he actually like left the country. Like we in like August, I think he like took off to go for these travels. And it was December. He'd been gone for a couple months and it was December and I was like, I want this marriage to stay in this year. I don't I'm done. It was such a like non-moving feeling in my body because every time I thought about going back, the anxiety would like just like ramp up immediately. And so I actually filed without telling him because I knew he would try to convince me otherwise. Because at that point, it had flipped. Like he wanted to get back together, and I was like, I just can't. Like, I do love you, but my idea of love is really fucked up, and I can't trust it right now. And so I need to, like, I love you. I care about you. I really wish you the best. I hope you heal. I hope you find happiness. But like, I can't do this to myself.
Mhm.
And so I filed, and then I had to tell him I filed, which was a whole thing. But it was such a grounded feeling. And once you learn, like, once you start to tap into that muscle flex of like, I literally just talked to a client about this yesterday. And I said, she's trying to pick between two different jobs. And I was like, picture the job you currently have. Feel like, close your eyes, feel how it feels in your body, feel how it feels when you go to work. Like, notice what's happening and then let that go. And then picture this potential job and like feel that and just notice which one like feels grounded. And she was like, yeah, I got it. Like, that's exactly, like, I know exactly what you're talking about. And I think a lot of people misconstrue anxiety as intuition because they think that anxiety is telling them like this is wrong or this is right or whatever. But intuition just doesn't work like that. It's not it's never going to feel frantic. Anxiety or intuition's never going to feel frantic. And once you get used to that feeling, it really does just start to like come into play and like you're like, okay, that's definitely intuition and that's anxiety. But I know why people do confuse the two because we play this game that anxiety is like some telling force.
Yeah. Well, I hear about it a lot with people after they go through breakups. They'll say like, "I still love him. I still miss them, so that must mean that I
Mm-mm,
meant to be with them." And I'm like,
mm-mm,
unfortunately, that's not what that means at all.
no.
It's just, that's your anxious thoughts. And of course, like you're with someone for a long period of time. Of course, you're going to miss them.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean anything, though.
It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
And it might have been your post actually. It was months ago and it was like you can miss something and not want it back.
Yeah.
And that I actually wrote down and like put on my refrigerator because what I struggled with was my codependency coming in and being like, I miss him, but I don't like it was a guilt. It was like, but I don't want to be with him.
Interesting. Yeah.
And does that make me a bad person? Like, I know all these things about him. He has so much trauma. Like, it's not his fault that he has all this trauma. Like, all the things we can rationalize and all the things I rationalized for 12 years. But then I was like, no, it's okay. Like, I can miss him. I can have a love for him and I can not want him back.
Yeah.
And I think the biggest thing with breakups and like letting go is rejection. I truly believe is the most painful thing that we can experience as humans because we're meant to be with people. We're meant to have community. We thrive that way. Like you hear about these people that go off into the woods and die at like 65 and they don't know why they died, but they were alone and they didn't have connection and they didn't have community, right? And so part of it's rejection, but part of it is this, I might be stepping out on a limb here, but I was holding myself back
Yeah.
from who knows what kind of like potential greatness I could have in this life, for fear, for not believing I deserved any better, for all of these things. And if you're questioning whether you should be with someone or not, taking space is the most beautiful thing you can do, because it can do one of two things. You can be like, actually really do want to be with that person. Or it can be like, actually, I really do not want to be with that person. And that's why people are terrified of it, because they are attached to the outcome. And that leads me to like the biggest thing was my trust in the surrender of letting go and being like, okay, universe, I want something better than this. What do you have for me? Guide me. And I know that's so like intangible, but it's one of the biggest things that got me through, of just trusting there's something bigger happening and that this pain is somehow going to transform and be something bigger.
That's so beautiful. And I tell people that because I believe that to be true for everyone that's going through a breakup. Like there's
Mm-hmm.
something so beautiful out there. But I also know that if you're just going through a breakup, it's probably not what you want to hear like right now. But I tell people it's like you don't have like just keep it the tiniest little grain of sand in the back of your mind. Like just remind yourself like that is true even if you're not like totally feeling it right now. Like it is true. So it's so important to like remember that it's a blessing in disguise and like
Yeah,
remember that by letting go of something, like you're always going to be rewarded with something better. And where there's space, like it will be filled. But it's,
100%.
it's so hard to remember. And I'm so glad that you were able to grasp onto that because, it's,
And trusting like it's not my person.
yeah,
Like like it's not. As humans, we're so attached to what we want, which is there's a beauty in that, of like, you know what you want. But like I wanted a child with him so bad, and now I'm like, I'm so glad I did not have a child with him. Like this all would have been like so much harder. And so it's like you look back on these things that you think you wanted so bad, that you were so desperate, you prayed for them, you wrote them down, you're like, I'm going to manifest this. And they just like never manifested. And you're like, why didn't? And now you're like, I'm so glad it didn't. Like, I know why it didn't now. And so just like knowing that, yeah, we can have our desires and what we want, but like the universe is way smarter than we are and knows that there's a bigger picture. And it's what people call blind faith, right? Like, of like, but you can't just have blind faith. You still have to also do the work.
exactly. Yeah. You still have to take those actions every day
Yeah. Yeah.
to,
You can't just wake up every morning and be like, well, I'm sad. And
and
like
that's it. Yeah.
not do anything to like transform the sadness.
Yeah.
And I think that's the biggest misunderstanding of people in general with like manifestation, is that they think they just have to write it down and then there's no action that comes from it. And it's like, no, like anything, really, truly, most things in life that are worth your energy take work.
Yeah.
It doesn't mean it has to be hard, brutal work, but like it takes an energetic exchange.
Yeah. I love the saying, like, you can't pray for food while sitting in a cave. Like,
No, like it's just like,
yeah,
no.
you can't do that.
Yeah.
But
Exactly.
I just think you are the most beautiful example of doing the work and being willing to see things a different way. And, I think your story is going to provide a lot of hope to the people listening to it. And I'm so excited to have you on
Thank
again to
you.
talk more about codependency because, we've talked, off podcast, but we have, we have very similar stories
Mhm.
with codependency and still being, I would still say like I am such a work in progress when it comes
Oh, I'm not at the end because I
to
don't know if that
codependency.
journey is ever done.
Yeah. Yeah. So
It's constant, like, battling with how your brain was wired and how you want to be.
yeah. So I'm so excited to have you on again. Can you share with people how they can find you, follow
Yeah.
you, potentially work with you?
Yeah, absolutely. My Instagram handle is Body Bliss Life. Um, I am bodyblisslife.com. All of my services are on my website. You can schedule a free discovery call with me where we connect and see if we're going to be a good fit for one another, because that sometimes it's just not. And I am taking new clients right now, so that's open. And I also have a lot of other offerings of like just herbal sessions, like one on just like single anxiety coaching sessions if you just need like a few tools. Like there's a multitude of things available. And thank you so much for having me on. I
Thank
really loved
you.
talking about
I love
it.
we were like when we had a call last week and I'm like, I have a feeling where we could talk for like 3 hours.
Hours.
But I will put all of her info in the show notes. But thank you so much for coming on, and I can't wait to have you on
Yeah,
again.
thank you. Me too.
I hope you enjoyed today's show. If you loved it, I hope you'll leave me a review and share with your friends. If you're interested in learning more about my course, Heal Your Breakup, where I take you step by step through my entire healing process, you can find more info at my website, breakupbestie.com. And if you're new, don't forget to join our private Facebook group so you can connect with other women going through the same thing and seek support. You can search Breakup Bestie Support Group on Facebook to join. Lastly, if you're not already following me on Instagram, I share new tips and support every single day. You can find me at Your Breakup Bestie. Most importantly, hang in there, stay connected with loved ones, be nice to yourself, and remember, it's all going to be okay. I promise.